The 1st of February was the day I learned that promises, even sincere ones, have an expiration date. Ethan's first payment had arrived on time, a clean deposit of $500 into my account, right there on the 15th of January, exactly 3 weeks after that Christmas dinner where he'd stood up in front of 20 relatives and called me the pillar of the family. I remember staring at the notification on my phone for almost a full minute, reading the numbers over and over, as if they might rearrange themselves into a lie. They didn't. It was real. My son was finally paying me back. But on the 1st of February, there was nothing. I told myself not to panic. People get busy. Banks have delays. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and waited for the day to pass the way I always had, quietly, patiently, the way I'd waited for 5 years for calls that came less and less often. By February 5th, I still hadn't heard from him. By February 10th, I opened the drawer where I kept the cardboard box. I hadn't touched it since Christmas. I ran my fingers along the edge of the lid and felt something I hadn't expected to feel again so soon. Not sadness. Suspicion. And that, more than anything, is what this story is really about, not the money, never the money, but the moment I understood that forgiving someone and trusting someone are two entirely different acts, and that I had, without meaning to, confused them. Chapter 1. The Second Silence. I want to be honest about something before I go further. After that Christmas, I let myself believe the hardest part was over. I had cried the tears, said the words, received the apology in front of witnesses. I thought healing worked like that: one confrontation, one toast, one check for $1,500, and the wound simply closes. I was wrong. Wounds like the one Ethan gave me don't close in an evening. They close in 1,000 small moments afterward, or they don't close at all. And that February, I began to suspect which one it was going to be. I called him on the 11th. He answered on the 5th ring, his voice tight, distracted. "Mom, hey, sorry, I've been slammed at work. I noticed the payment didn't come this month." A pause. Not a long one. Just long enough for me to notice it. "Right, yeah. About that. Things have been tight. Chloe's card got declined at the grocery store last week and I had to move some money around. I'll catch up next month, I promise." Double payment. I sat with the phone against my ear and said nothing for a moment, because I was doing the thing I had trained myself to do over 5 years, calculating, in real time, whether I believed him. "Okay," I said finally. "Next month. Thanks, Mom. Love you." He hung up before I could answer, the same way he always had. Some habits, I was learning, don't die just because a man cries at a dinner table once. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself people miss payments. I told myself Ethan had never lied to me about big things, only forgotten small ones. I did not yet know about the credit card. I did not yet know about Chloe's new car. I did not yet know that 3 days before that call, my son and his wife had walked into a dealership and driven out in a leased Lexus with a payment of $640 a month, and that the tight month he described to me was tight only because of a decision they had made together, a decision that did not once include the words "*we owe my mother money*". I found this out the way I find out most things now, by paying attention to the details other people assume I'm too old, or too tired, or too far outside their lives to notice. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because before any of that, there was a smaller moment, one so ordinary I almost let it pass without weighing it, and it's that moment I keep returning to now, because it was the first thread of a pattern I hadn't yet learned to name. It happened on a Tuesday, the week after the missed payment, when Ethan called just to talk, or so he said. We spoke for 11 minutes, which by the new standard WID set was practically a marathon. He told me about a project at work, a client who was difficult, a coworker who'd been promoted over him unfairly. I listened the way I always had, offering the small sounds of sympathy a mother offers automatically, the way you'd nod along to a song you've heard 1,000 times. Near the end of the call, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned that Chloe had picked up a new car that week. "Oh," I said, careful to keep my voice light. "What kind?" "A Lexus. She's been wanting one for a while. It's nice, has all the safety features, which matters now that, well, we're thinking about starting a family soon." I remember exactly where I was standing when he said this, by the kitchen counter, one hand resting on the cool tile, looking out at the small patch of yard where I still hadn't managed to fix the fence Arthur had built 30 years ago. I remember thinking, with a kind of quiet, unhurried clarity, he told me about the car in the same breath as thinking about babies and safety features, as if it belonged to the category of responsible decisions, not luxury ones. I didn't say anything about the missed payment. Not that day. I told myself it wasn't the right moment, that raising money matters in the middle of a friendly call would sour something we'd only just begun rebuilding. But some quiet, watchful part of me, the part that had spent 5 years doing arithmetic in a small kitchen with an old stove, filed the detail away exactly the way I used to file away a receipt. That is how suspicion begins, I've learned. Not with a single dramatic betrayal, but with a small detail that doesn't sit quite right, tucked into an otherwise pleasant conversation, waiting patiently for a second detail to arrive and keep it company. Chapter 2, The Photo. It was my sister Helen who showed me. We'd started having lunch again, Helen and I, something we hadn't done regularly since before Arthur died. She'd call on Tuesdays now, ask if I wanted to meet at the little diner near the church, the one with the vinyl booths and the coffee that never runs out. It was one of the good things that had come out of that Christmas, my sister remembering she had a sister. We were halfway through our sandwiches when she pulled out her phone, scrolling through something with the small, private smile people get when they're about to share gossip they know they shouldn't. "Did you see Chloe's new car?" she asked, turning the screen toward me. There it was. A photograph, posted 2 days earlier, Chloe leaning against the hood of a gleaming silver Lexus, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, the caption reading "treated myself, life's too short" with 3 champagne emojis. I looked at that photograph for a long time. Helen must have seen something shift in my face, because she set her phone down. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" "Nothing," I said, and I meant it, in the sense that nothing had happened yet. But something was beginning. I could feel it the way you feel a storm before the sky changes color, a pressure, a stillness, a certainty that the calm was about to end. I finished my sandwich. I paid for lunch, the way I always insisted on doing every third time, and I walked home in the cold February air, turning one thought over and over in my mind. Life's too short. She wasn't wrong. Life is too short. Too short to spend hiding in someone's kitchen while they take credit for your cooking. Too short to spend eating almost nothing so your son can drive a car with heated seats. Too short to keep waiting for people to remember you exist. But I didn't call Ethan that night. I didn't send an angry text. I had learned something in the 5 years before that Christmas dinner, something I intended to use now instead of my anger. I had learned to be patient in a way that serves me, not everyone else. So I waited. I watched. And I started writing things down again. Chapter 2.5, The voicemail I wasn't supposed to hear. 3 days after Helen showed me that photograph, something happened that I still find difficult to write about, because it involves a kind of eavesdropping I've never been proud of, even when the information it gave me turned out to matter. I had called Ethan's phone to ask a simple, harmless question, whether he still had the folding chairs Arthur used to keep in the garage, the ones I'd lent him years ago for a work event and never gotten back. The call went to voicemail. I was about to hang up when, instead of the automated tone, I heard a strange half-second of live audio, the kind of accidental connection that happens sometimes when a call is declined a beat too late, catching a fragment of the room on the other end before the line goes properly dead. I heard Chloe's voice, muffled, mid-sentence, clearly not speaking to me and not aware anyone was listening. Because if we tell her about the car now, she's going to make it a whole thing, and I don't want to deal with her guilt-tripping right after Christmas. Just let the payment slide this month and tell her things are tight. She'll believe it. She always believes it. She always believes it. The line went dead a half-second later, the way these things do, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing at all. I did not call back. I did not confront him that night, or the next, or the one after that. I sat with those 5 words for a long time, turning them over the way you turn over a stone to see what's living underneath it. She always believes it. I thought about all the years I had believed it, the excuses, the later, the promises of reimbursement that arrived weeks too late or not at all. I had believed it not because I was foolish, but because believing it was easier than confronting the alternative, that my son and his wife had learned, across years of my silence, exactly how much they could ask of me and exactly how little they needed to give back. That fragment of overheard voicemail became the true beginning of the second box, more than the missed payment ever was. Because a missed payment can be an accident. A person telling their spouse, deliberately, she always believes it that isn't an accident. That's a strategy. And once I understood I was being managed rather than simply forgotten, everything else I'd been willing to excuse came into much sharper focus. Chapter 3, The New Box. I bought a second cardboard box the following week. Smaller than the first, the kind you'd use to mail a sweater. I labeled it, in the same careful handwriting I'd used before, with a single word. Evidence. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like the beginning of something ugly, something a mother shouldn't do to her own son. But I want you to understand I wasn't building a case to hurt Ethan. I was building a case to protect myself, because I had spent 5 years without one, and I had promised myself, that night after Christmas, alone in my house with Arthur's photograph, that I would never again be a woman without proof of her own worth. Into that box went things like this. A printout of the missed February payment. A screenshot Helen sent me, at my request, of the Lexus post, the date stamped clearly beneath it. A note I wrote to myself, dated, describing the phone call where Ethan told me things were tight. It felt strange at first, almost paranoid, cataloguing my own son's excuses like a detective building a file. But as the weeks went on, I stopped feeling strange about it and started feeling something closer to calm. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from no longer needing someone else's version of events to be the only version that exists. March came. No payment. April came. Half a payment, $250, with a text that read "Sorry mom, we'll make it up." By May, I understood something I had spent 5 years refusing to understand, an apology delivered once, beautifully, at a dinner table in front of 20 relatives, costs a person nothing to give and nothing to repeat. It is the actions afterward, the boring, unglamorous, monthly actions, that tell you whether the apology was a turning point or a performance. I was beginning to suspect Ethan's had been a performance. And Chloe's apology on the phone that same season, the one about the caterer and the Christmas guest list, was starting to look like the opening act of a play that had already ended. "I'm glad you kept the box," he said quietly. "The receipts. I used to think it was, I don't know, cold, maybe, keeping score. But I don't think that anymore. I think it was the only thing that made me actually see you." "It wasn't about keeping score," I said. "It was about refusing to disappear. There's a difference, even if it doesn't always look like one from the outside." He nodded, and we sat together in a comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need filling, the kind I hadn't known with my son in years before that Christmas, and might never have known again if I hadn't, on one exhausted night after a birthday dinner I cooked and never got credit for, decided that I was done being invisible in my own family's story. It took a cardboard box of receipts, a birthday dinner I ate none of, and a Christmas confession that turned out to be only the beginning, not the ending, to get here. But I got here. And I am never going back. The end. "You were a sweet boy," I said. "You hugged me before bed and told me you'd take care of me one day. I don't think you were born selfish, Ethan. I think you learned, slowly, that I would give without limits, and somewhere along the way, giving without limits started to look like love to you, instead of what it actually was, a woman afraid of losing the only family she had left." He was quiet, rocking his daughter gently in his arms. "I don't want her to learn that," he said finally, nodding toward Arthur Grace. "I don't want her to think love means erasing yourself for the people you love." "Then teach her the opposite," I said. "Teach her to give generously, and to expect to be treated with respect while she does it. Those two things were never supposed to be in conflict, Ethan. I just spent most of my life believing they were." He looked down at his daughter, asleep against his chest, and then back up at me, and for a moment I saw, very clearly, the small boy who used to hug me before bed, grown now into a man still learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to be worthy of the love he'd been given. "Into that box, I intend to put only good things. The receipt from the day Ethan bought me a proper stove, unprompted, because he noticed mine still needed a match to light. The card he sent for no reason at all last spring that simply said asterisk thinking about you, hope today is good. Asterisk the photograph from Arthur Grace's baptism, where I am standing in the center of the family, not hidden in a kitchen, not called busy when someone asks where I am, but present, visible, seen. I keep that box not because I expect to need proof again. I keep it because I have learned something in this last strange, difficult, healing year of my life, something I want every woman who reads this to carry with her the way I now carry it. Love without boundaries is not sacrifice. It is disappearance. And a mother, any person, really, who has spent a lifetime disappearing for the people she loves owes herself, at least once, the dignity of being fully, stubbornly, unapologetically seen. I am 69 years old now. I have an $800 pension, a small house with water stains I still haven't fixed, a granddaughter who falls asleep on my chest every Sunday afternoon, and a son who calls not because he needs something, but because he wants to hear my voice. Last Sunday, Ethan brought Arthur Grace over while Chloe rested, and we sat together in my small living room, the one with the cracked ceiling I've still never repaired, and he asked me something I don't think he would have thought to ask a year and a half ago. Mom, was I always like this? Or did I become like this? I thought about the question for a long time before answering, because I wanted to give him the truth, not the comfortable version of it. I stood in the doorway, momentarily unable to speak. It was such a small thing, a stove, a phone call to a repairman, a Saturday morning of his time, and yet it undid me more completely than the check for $1,500 ever had, because a check is easy to write once and never think about again. A Saturday morning, given freely, without being asked, without an audience to witness the gesture and call it generous, is a different kind of currency entirely. You didn't have to do that, I said, when I finally found my voice. I know, he said. That's kind of the point, Mom. I wanted to. We stood on that porch together for a while, not saying much else, watching the late September light move across the little patch of yard where the fence still leaned the way it always had. It occurred to me, standing there, that I had spent 5 years measuring my son's love by what he asked of me, and an entire difficult year afterward learning to measure it instead by what he offered without being asked. The second measurement, I have found, is the only one that tells the truth. Chapter 10, the third box. I still have both boxes. The first one, full of 5 years of silent sacrifice. The second, thinner, full of 6 difficult months that taught me the difference between an apology and a change. Sometimes I think about closing them for good, putting them away in the storage room with the boxes of Ethan's childhood things, artifacts of a war that's finally over. But I've decided to keep a third box instead empty, for now, sitting on the corner of my desk beside a photograph of Arthur Grace at 2 months old, gripping my finger with her whole tiny fist. It wasn't perfect. There were months he forgot to call and had to catch himself, apologizing not with a grand gesture but with a simple asterisk I dropped the ball. I'm sorry, tell me about your week. There was one Sunday in August when Chloe and I had a real disagreement about the nursery colors, and instead of retreating into her old silence, she actually argued with me, really argued, the way people do when they consider each other worth the effort, and afterward she called to apologize for how she'd raised her voice, and I apologized for mine, and we ended the call laughing about something neither of us even remembered starting. That, I have come to understand, is what real repair looks like. Not a single perfect Christmas. 1,000 imperfect Tuesdays, chosen again and again, by people who could just as easily choose the easier road of forgetting you. There was one afternoon in late September, a few weeks before Arthur Grace was born, when Ethan showed up at my door unannounced, something he hadn't done since that difficult December visit almost a year earlier. This time, though, he wasn't carrying an apology. He was carrying a toolbox. I know you didn't ask, he said, standing on my porch in his work clothes, looking almost shy about it. But I've had that stove on my mind for months. Yours still needs a match, right? I found a guy who does appliance repair on the side, cheap, and I already talked to him. He can come Saturday if that's okay with you. He agreed to all of it. And this time, I didn't simply believe him because I wanted to. I told him I would need to see it, month after month, the boring unglamorous way trust gets rebuilt, not in a single tearful toast, but in 100 small Tuesdays where he called simply because he wanted to know how I was. Chapter 9, October. The baby came in October, 3 weeks early, a girl they named Arthur Grace, after her great-grandfather, a detail that undid me more completely than almost anything else in this entire story. I held her in the hospital room, this tiny impossible person with her father's stubborn chin, and I felt the particular vertigo of loving someone before you've even learned their face. Ethan stood beside the bed, exhausted, unshaven, more present than I had seen him in years. "We wanted to ask you something," Chloe said from the bed, her voice soft with the peculiar honesty that seems to visit people in hospital rooms. "Would you be willing to help us sometimes? Not because we expect it. Because we'd like to know her grandmother, if you're willing. If you're willing. Not you're so good at this, so we thought not an assumption dressed as a compliment. An actual question, with an actual door left open for me to say no. I would love that, I said, and I meant it completely, because this time, the invitation had come with respect built into its very grammar. The payments had come every month since our conversation at my kitchen table, never late, never partial, sometimes even a few days early, with a short text attached. Sent it, hope you're doing okay, call you Sunday. And he did call, every Sunday, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for an hour, asking about my garden, my knees, my sister, the things that make up an actual life instead of a transaction. "There's something else," he said. I overheard. "No. I need to just say it straight. I know Chloe told her mom you'd gotten difficult. I want you to know I told her that wasn't fair. We actually had a big fight about it, the week before I called you. She said I was choosing you over our own family, and I told her that you our own family, and that if she couldn't see that, that was something we needed to work out together, not something you needed to apologize for." I felt something in my throat tighten. "You said that to her?" "I did. It didn't go great, honestly. We're still working through some things. But I needed you to know I didn't just sit there and let her talk about you like that without saying anything. Not this time. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a toast in front of 20 relatives. But something about the smallness of it, a private argument in his own kitchen, defending me when he thought no one but his wife would ever know, struck me as more real than almost anything he'd said at that Christmas table a year before. "Thank you for telling me that," I said quietly. "That matters more than you know." "Then here is what that looks like," I said, and I told him, plainly, the way I would have told him years ago if I'd had the courage. No shower planning. No cooking for family events unless I offered. A payment schedule we would agree to together, in writing, that he would honor the way he'd honor a debt to a bank, because that is, in fact, exactly what it was. And phone calls, real ones, not 2 minutes of surface questions, but actual conversations, where he asked about my life and waited long enough to hear the answer. Because it's easier Mom, and I hate saying that out loud because it makes me sound like a terrible person, but it's true. It was easier when you just gave. It required nothing from me. And now it requires something from me every single month, and some months I don't want to do the work, so I don't." I felt something in my chest loosen slightly, not because what he'd said made the past year hurt any less, but because it was, for the first time, completely honest. Not a performance. Not a toast in front of relatives. Just a tired, flawed man telling his mother the truth about his own laziness and calling it what it was. "That," I said, "is the most honest thing you've said to me in years." "I'm scared, Mom," he admitted. "I'm about to have a kid, and I don't know if I'm going to do to them what." He stopped again, but I understood the sentence he didn't finish. What I did to you. You won't," I said, "if you keep doing what you just did right now. Telling the truth even when it's ugly. That's the whole difference, Ethan. It was never about the money. It was never really about the Lexus, or the shower, or even the birthday dinner last year. It was about whether you would see me as a person with limits, or as a resource with none." He reached across the table and took my hand, the way he used to when he was small and afraid of the dark. "I want to see you as a person," he said. "I want to actually do it this time. Not just say it at Christmas and forget it by February." There was a long pause then, and I could see him deciding whether to say the next thing. Finally, he did. "She did tell me. But Ethan, I want to be clear about something. This isn't only about one phone call Chloe made to her mother. It's about a missed payment in February. A half payment in April. A Lexus lease the same week you told me things were tight. A request to plan and fund a baby shower less than 5 months after you cried at a dinner table and told 20 people you'd failed me. I need you to understand that none of those things, on their own, would have broken my trust. It's the pattern, Ethan. It's always the pattern. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost the defensiveness I'd braced myself for. You're right, he said. About all of it. The car, that was Chloe's idea, but I agreed to it, so it's on me too. And I told myself the payment thing was temporary, that I'd catch up, and every month I told myself that same lie, and every month it got easier to believe it because you never, he stopped himself. Because I never pushed, I finished for him. Because for 5 years, I taught you that I would absorb whatever happened without consequence. And then I stopped, for one Christmas dinner, and you thought that was the whole correction. One dinner. One apology. And now we could go back to how things were, as long as I didn't make it *2* uncomfortable. He flinched, but he didn't argue. I don't know how to be the son you need, he said quietly. I keep defaulting back to old patterns. Not because I don't love you. But I had a box on my desk that reminded me what happened when I never pushed at all. On the 7th day, my phone rang. Not a text. A call. Mom, Ethan said, and his voice was different from the last time we'd spoken, quieter, more careful, stripped of the performance I'd started to recognize in him. Can I come over? I don't want to do this on the phone. Yes, I said. Come over. Chapter 8. The kitchen table, again. He arrived an hour later, alone, no Chloe, carrying nothing but the same uncertain expression he'd worn the day he stood in my doorway last December, asking why I wasn't answering his calls. We sat at the same kitchen table where I'd once opened a cardboard box in front of him and let 5 years of silence finally speak. I read your text probably 50 times, he said. I kept getting angry, and then I kept getting less angry, and I think it took me 6 days because I needed to actually think about what you said instead of just reacting to it. That's more than you used to do, I said, not unkindly. He nodded, staring at his hands. Aunt Clara told you what Chloe said. I know she did. Chloe told me Clara was in the kitchen when she was on the phone. I love you, and I love this baby already, more than words can say. I will be at the shower, on the day, as a guest. I will not be planning it, funding it, or discussing the payment schedule until you're ready to have that conversation honestly, without me having to hear about your priorities from Aunt Clara instead of from you. I'm not angry. I'm just done pretending I don't notice things. Call me when you're ready to talk like an adult to your mother, not like a man managing an inconvenience. I sent it before I could talk myself out of it. Then I put the phone face down on the table, made myself a cup of tea, and did not check it again for the rest of the night. Chapter 7. The longest week. He didn't respond for 6 days. I want to tell you those 6 days were easy, that the peace I'd built for myself over the past year carried me through without a single sleepless night. That would be a lie, and I promised myself, sitting down to write all of this, that I would tell the truth even when the truth is unflattering to the person I've become. I checked my phone more than I'd like to admit. I reread the text I'd sent at least a dozen times, wondering if I'd been too harsh, too cold, too much like a woman keeping score instead of a mother keeping faith. Old habits are patient. They wait in the corners of your mind for a moment of doubt, and then they whisper the same old lie, if you push too hard, you'll lose him again. The first box was the story of a woman who gave without limits and was rewarded with contempt. The second box was the story of the same woman, 1 year wiser, watching to see whether a single Christmas confession had actually changed anything, or whether it had simply been the price Ethan was willing to pay to make an uncomfortable dinner conversation end. I thought about the old woman at the church, her lavender smell, her rosary, her voice telling me that sometimes the greatest love we can give is to teach people to value us, not with words, but with actions. I had done that once. I had set a boundary. But a boundary set once and never enforced isn't a boundary. It's a suggestion. And I was done making suggestions. So I made a decision, and it was this: I would not confront Ethan with anger. I would not send an accusing text, or bring up Aunt Clara's phone call, or demand an explanation for the Lexus. Anger, I had learned, gives people something to defend against, and defending is so much easier than reflecting. Instead, I would simply stop. I would stop waiting for the payments as though they were owed to me on a schedule I had no power over. I would stop hoping the shower request had been an accident of thoughtlessness rather than a pattern. I would stop, most of all, mistaking my son's tears at that Christmas dinner for a permanent transformation, when they may have only ever been a temporary performance of remorse, deep and real in the moment, but never followed by the daily, boring work of change. I picked up my phone and wrote a single text to Ethan. "There's more," Clara said quietly. She said Ethan's been talking about, and I'm quoting her here, Eleanor, scaling back the payments because with the baby coming, they need to, quote, prioritize their own family first. I closed my eyes. Their own family. As if I were something else. A former family. A retired family. A family that had served its purpose and could now be quietly moved to the back of the ledger. "Thank you for telling me, Clara," I said, and I was surprised by how steady my own voice sounded, because inside, something that had been slowly rebuilding itself over the past year, trust, fragile and new, had just taken a direct hit. "Are you okay?" Clara asked. "I will be," I said. "I think I need to make a decision." Chapter 6, The Decision. I didn't call Ethan that night, or the next. I sat with what I'd learned the way I'd learned to sit with hard things, slowly, deliberately, refusing to let panic write the next chapter of my life for me. I took out both boxes. The old one, full of 5 years of receipts and the document I'd once handed my son across a coffee table. And the new one, thinner, still filling the missed payments, the Lexus, the shower request, and now, in my own handwriting, the words Aunt Clara had repeated to me over the phone. I laid them side by side on my kitchen table and looked at what they represented. "Eleanor, I have to tell you something, and I don't know if it's my place, but I think you should know." My stomach tightened. "What is it, Clara?" "I was at Chloe's mother's house last week, you know Diane. She's been staying with them to help prepare, and Chloe didn't know I was still in the kitchen when she was talking on the phone. I wasn't trying to listen, I promise you, but I heard her say your name, and then I heard her say something I couldn't just forget." "Tell me." Clara's voice dropped, the way voices do when they're about to repeat something that was never meant to travel this far. She said, Eleanor's gotten so difficult since Christmas. I don't know what got into her. She used to be so helpful, and now she acts like we owe her something. I felt the words land somewhere behind my ribs, a familiar ache in an old bruise. She acts like we owe her something. As if $15,200 of my pension hadn't paid their rent and their vacations and God knows what else for 5 years. As if $353 of my own money hadn't gone toward chicken and chocolate and chilies for a birthday dinner I cooked alone in someone else's kitchen while being told to stay out of sight. As if owing were not, in fact, exactly what this was. I thought, that evening, about calling him back and softening what I'd said, offering to help with just the decorations, maybe, or just the guest list, some small concession that would ease the tension without fully surrendering the boundary. The old version of me, the one who spent 5 years and $15,200 trying to stay indispensable, would have made that call within the hour. I didn't make it. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in months. I took out a fresh sheet of paper, not for the box, not for evidence, just for myself, and I wrote down every reason I had told myself, over the past year, that saying no was somehow a betrayal of motherhood. He's my only son. Family helps family. What kind of mother refuses to help plan her grandchild's shower? I don't want to be the difficult one. I don't want to lose him again. I read that list back to myself in the quiet of my kitchen, and I understood, with a clarity that startled me, that every single one of those sentences had been handed to me by someone else, by Ethan, by Chloe, by a lifetime of being told that a woman's love is measured by how much of herself she's willing to erase. None of them had ever come from what I actually believed a mother owed her child. I folded the paper and put it not in the evidence box, but in the drawer beside my bed, where I could find it again on the nights the old guilt came looking for me. And it did come looking, more than once, in the weeks that followed. Chapter 5, What Chloe Said. I found out what happened next from Aunt Clara, of all people, who called me on a Sunday evening sounding like she'd been sitting on the information for days and simply couldn't hold it any longer. "Wow," Ethan said finally, and there was something in his tone I didn't like, not anger exactly, but a kind of wounded surprise, as if I'd broken an unspoken rule. "Okay. Okay. I just thought, since you're so good at that stuff." "I am good at it," I said. "That's not the question. The question is whether it's fair to ask, and Ethan, I don't think it is. Not after everything. This isn't about last year, Mom. This is about your grandchild." And there it was, the sentence designed to make me feel small for protecting myself, the sentence that suggested love and sacrifice were the same currency, that a woman who sets a boundary around a baby shower must not really love the baby. I had heard that sentence structure before, in different words, across 5 years of my life. Asterisk, you've always cooked for the family, it's what you do. We miss you. It would mean so much. Asterisk, each one a small hook designed to pull me back into the water before I'd even finished drying off. It's about both, I said calmly. I can love this baby with my whole heart and still refuse to be the unpaid help at its shower. Those two things are not in conflict, Ethan. I need you to understand that, because if you don't, this is going to keep happening over and over, for the rest of this child's life, until one day I am too old and too tired to say no anymore, and you will have learned nothing. I heard him exhale slowly on the other end. I hear you, he said, though his voice had gone flat, the excitement drained out of it. I gotta go, Mom. I'll talk to you later. He hung up. Not angrily. Just done. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that call, staring at the wall, feeling the particular loneliness that comes not from being ignored, but from being almost understood, and then let go anyway. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table, and for a moment I said nothing, listening to my son fill the silence with logistics, the guest list, the venue, whether I might know a good bakery, whether I still had that folding table from Arthur's retirement party, whether I could maybe, if it wasn't too much trouble, look into decorations because Chloe was so busy with her clients right now, and honestly it would mean so much to have my help. 5 years ago, I would have said yes before he finished the sentence. A year ago, standing in that kitchen full of dirty dishes at midnight, I would have said yes out of habit, out of fear, out of the terrible arithmetic that told me saying no would cost me my son. But I was not that woman anymore. I had a box in my desk drawer that reminded me, every time I opened it, exactly what saying yes without boundaries had already cost me. Ethan, I said, I would love to be part of the shower. I'll come. I'll bring a gift. I want to celebrate this baby with everything in me. Great, so you'll help with. I'm not finished, I said, gently but clearly. I am not going to plan it. I am not going to pay for it. I am not going to cook for it. I am going to attend it, as a grandmother, and I am going to enjoy every second of being a guest. The silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. Chapter 4, The Invitation. It was Helen who called with the news this time, her voice pitched somewhere between excitement and hesitation. Eleanor, did Ethan tell you? They're having a baby. I stood very still in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, feeling something complicated move through my chest, joy, real joy, because I was going to be a grandmother, and beneath it, quieter but unmistakable, a kind of bracing. A part of me that had learned, over the last year, to ask a different question before celebrating. Asterisk, what is this going to cost me? Asterisk. I hated that I thought it. I hated that 5 years of being used had trained a suspicious animal into the corner of my heart that used to hold nothing but hope. But I had learned, from the church, from that old woman with the rosary, from the silence of my own apartment on nights Ethan didn't call, that hope without boundaries isn't love. It's just an open door with no one guarding it. Ethan called 2 days later, his voice full of an excitement I hadn't heard from him in years, not even at Christmas. Mom, we wanted you to be one of the first to know. Chloe's due in October. That's wonderful, Ethan, I said, and I meant every word of it. There's going to be a shower, he continued. Chloe's mom is helping plan it, but honestly, Mom, we were thinking you're so good at hosting, and her mom lives out of state, so we thought maybe you could help coordinate things here. Nothing big. Just, some of the details. There it was.